What happened to Jesus in the 3 days no gospel dares to describe? Did he rest in silence? Or descend into a war no one speaks of anymore? The body of Jesus lies cold in the borrowed tomb. The stone seals the darkness. The air in Jerusalem hangs heavy, as if creation itself is holding its breath. But under this silence lurks a secret, 3 days hidden from the eyes of history, 3 days that vanish between crucifixion and resurrection. We read past them as if they were empty, yet hints scattered across Scripture suggest otherwise. Ancient Christians whispered of a descent, not into peace, but into chaos. They called it the Harrowing of Hell, a raid on the gates of death itself. But have you ever wondered why this story, so vivid in early hymns and apocryphal texts, is muted in modern preaching? Did later scribes soften it? Did councils bury it beneath safer doctrines? Or was it always meant to remain a mystery, whispered only to those who search? Fragments survive, scattered like shards of shattered tablets. Matthew's riddle about the heart of the earth, Luke's promise of paradise to the thief, Peter's cryptic mention of spirits in prison. They do not tell the story outright. They force us to investigate. Picture this. While Rome slept and disciples wept, Jesus walked the halls of the dead. He crossed thresholds no mortal had crossed. Shadows stirred, chains rattled. Adam lifted his eyes and saw the second Adam entering Sheol. If he descended that far, what was he really doing in those depths? And what did he bring back with him when the stone rolled away? They called it the heart of the earth. But in his final days, when Jesus spoke those words, what storm of meaning burned behind his silence? Matthew 12:40 records him warning the Pharisees, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." To us, it reads like poetry. To his followers, it sounded like dread. Because Jonah was alive inside the fish, wrestling in prayer, pleading for deliverance, he was not at rest, he was in turmoil. Could Jesus be hinting that his burial would not be rest either, but struggle, a descent into war? Picture his last conscious moments on the cross, the weight of the world's sin compressing his lungs, the jeers fading into the distance as blood dripped into the dust of Golgotha. When he whispered, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," Luke 23:46, his body sagged in death, yet his soul did not drift upward into peace. It plunged downward into shadows older than the world itself, and no gospel fully tells you what he saw there. To a first-century Jew, heart of the earth meant more than soil and stone. It was Sheol, the waiting realm of the dead, neither heaven nor hell, but a divided underworld. The righteous dead gathered in what Jesus called Abraham's bosom, Luke 16:22, a place of comfort. The wicked languished in Gehenna, a place of torment. Between them yawned an unbridgeable gulf. The living could not see it, but the dead knew its boundaries well. Yet, centuries later, this landscape faded. Translators replaced Sheol with Hades, a Greek word carrying different myths: ferrymen, shadowed gates, rivers of fire. Slowly, Christian preaching simplified the afterlife into a binary heaven or hell. Why erase such complexity? Was it innocent translation, or a quiet decision to make death less mysterious? Scholars whisper that this choice may have been deliberate, silencing a vision of the underworld too strange for later theology. Now imagine it through his eyes. Jesus descends through layers of silence. The first is the hush of the tomb. The second, the stunned stillness of souls awaiting judgment. Deeper still, the murmurs of patriarchs who died in hope. Abraham lifting his head, David pausing his silent psalm, Isaiah's eyes widening with recognition. For generations they had waited. Now the promised one stood among them. Across the gulf, the cries of the wicked echoed. Cain, Pharaoh, Herod, their shadows recoiled at his light. Even further below, bound in Tartarus, chained angels stirred, the watchers of Genesis 6, whose rebellion drowned the world in Noah's day. 1 Peter 3:19 hints at this. He preached to the spirits in prison, not just humans. spirits, fallen powers. Was this descent proclamation or confrontation? Did he offer grace to the imprisoned or seal their doom with his presence? We are left with fragments, a phrase here, a vision there, as if the full account was scraped from the parchment, buried in silence. Do you feel the weight of that omission? 3 days glossed over in most sermons, hurried past as if nothing happened. Yet early Christians sang hymns of the harrowing of hell, Christ breaking gates, binding death, leading captives to freedom. Why did later traditions mute this victory? Was it too apocalyptic, too raw for the safer creeds of later centuries? And consider the cost to him. We speak of his physical agony on the cross, but what of the spiritual agony beneath? To step into Sheol was to feel the despair of millennia, the collective sigh of humanity cut off from God. To enter that place meant bearing not only sin, but separation, silence, and the echo of prayers unanswered for ages. What drove him there? Love? Justice? A vow made before the foundations of the world? If he crossed even death's deepest boundary, what does that say about the lengths he will go to reach us? And why, after all these centuries, is this descent barely whispered about in our churches? They say paradise was promised that very day, but where was paradise if he was descending into the realm of the dead? Luke 23:43 preserves the promise, spoken through blood and exhaustion. Today you will be with me in paradise. It sounds simple to us now, but to the ears of a first-century Jew, the word paradise carried echoes older than the world itself. Eden's lost garden, the dwelling place of God, a sanctuary hidden yet near. Was it a garden above the heavens, or was it a chamber below, nestled within Sheol? Pause here. Look again at the cross. The world is dimming, storm clouds breaking, the earth trembling beneath Golgotha's hill. One thief mocks him, another defends. Jesus, gasping for breath, turns his face, sweat and blood mingling on his lips, and whispers the promise. He does not say, "You will be in heaven." He says, "You will be with me." Presence, not location. Companionship, not coordinates. And in that promise, a paradox begins. Because Scripture tells us two truths that seem impossible to reconcile. Jesus descended to the dead, Acts 2:31, 1 Peter 3:19, and yet he promised immediate paradise. Were these two separate places, or was paradise hidden within Sheol, divided from the realm of torment by an unseen veil? Ancient Jewish writings suggest a layered afterlife more complex than our modern heaven or hell binary. The Hebrew Bible calls it Sheol, a place where all the dead go, righteous and wicked alike, to await judgment. But Second Temple texts, like 1 Enoch 22, describe Sheol as divided into chambers, bright hollows for the righteous dead, and shadowed pits for the wicked. One chamber is called Abraham's bosom, a place of rest where the faithful await redemption, Luke 16:22. Another is Gehenna, a place of fire and anguish. Between them lies a gulf, wide enough to separate, close enough for cries to be heard across. Here is where it grows stranger. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text, not canonical but influential, describes Eden itself as a heavenly realm preserved since creation, a cosmic garden awaiting the righteous. Rabbinic tradition sometimes places Eden not above but below, hidden within the same underworld where Sheol resides. In other words, paradise and Sheol might overlap, separated only by God's will. Do you see the implications? The thief dies and awakens not in a tranquil sky but in a garden blooming beneath the earth, its light spilling against the darkness of the wicked's torment. He sees Jesus walking beside him, no longer bloody and beaten but radiant, eyes burning with calm resolve. Around them stir figures long dead, Abel, silent since Cain's blow, Abraham, waiting centuries, David, the singer whose psalms had prophesied this very descent. Imagine the thief's awe. Hours ago he was gasping on a cross, convinced his life was wasted. Now he beholds the Son of Man striding into Sheol as conqueror, bearing promises older than the stars. But the scene is not tranquil. Across the gulf, shadows shift. The wicked dead recoil from the light. Somewhere deeper still, below even their screams, chains rattle. The bound angels of Genesis 6, kept in gloomy darkness. Jude 6. Their silence feels heavier than the cries of the damned. It is as if Scripture itself has muted them, their rebellion too foul to describe. Was this deliberate? Were their cries scrubbed from the scrolls, erased to shield us from a truth too haunting? And so we reach the paradise paradox. Was this garden above or below? Did Jesus ascend or descend? Early Christian texts hint at both. The Gospel of Nicodemus, apocryphal but early, places paradise adjacent to Hades, close enough for the righteous to hear the gates shattering when Christ arrives. Meanwhile, Paul in 2 Corinthians 12 describes being caught up to paradise, equating it with the third heaven. 2 locations, 2 traditions, 1 word. Why do modern sermons flatten this? Why does paradise become a synonym for heaven, stripped of its layered, liminal mystery? Could it be that later councils simplified the afterlife to combat heresies, erasing the older Jewish cosmology? Was it too unsettling to admit that paradise, even for the righteous, once lay beneath our feet? This matters because it reframes the descent. If paradise was within Sheol, then Christ's journey was not from cross to bliss, but from agony to rescue mission. He entered the darkness not as prisoner, but as liberator, walking the same halls where prophets had waited centuries. And his promise to the thief, today, was not delayed to Sunday morning. Victory had already begun. Pause again. Feel the weight of that silence after the crucifixion. The world above mourns, unaware that beneath them, in unseen caverns, light is already breaking. Paradise blooms in the heart of the earth. But do we dare ask, what lay beyond paradise? What voices waited in the deeper chambers, chained and ancient? Did Christ stop at comfort, or did he march further, toward confrontation? The silence of paradise did not last. Beyond the garden's light lay deeper chambers, darker hollows, where the air thickened and the cries of the unredeemed echoed like wind in a cavern. And here, Scripture hints, Jesus walked still further, not to comfort, but to confront. 1 Peter 3:18-20 whispers it almost in passing. He went and preached unto the spirits in prison. Just that. A single line, stripped of detail, like ink faded deliberately by time. But whose spirits? And what was he saying? We have clues, scattered like fragments of shattered tablets. Jude 6 speaks of angels who left their proper dwelling, bound in chains of gloomy darkness. 2 Peter 2:4 confirms it. They were cast into Tartarus, a word borrowed from Greek myth, the deepest pit of the underworld. This is not Gehenna's fire, nor Abraham's bosom's comfort. It is a dungeon beneath dungeons. And Christ, carrying victory in his scars, descends even here. Pause and picture it. The thief remains in paradise, watching from the garden's threshold as Christ walks toward a chasm older than Eden. The righteous dead murmur in awe. Adam and Noah exchange glances heavy with unspoken questions. What will he face in those depths? Does even death fear him? Now imagine Jesus himself in this moment. His human soul, still bearing the memory of nails and thorns, steps into a darkness, untouched by grace. The cries of the flood's wicked rise faintly around him. He hears whispers, bitter, ancient, familiar. Here lie the watchers of Genesis 6, angels who abandoned heaven to corrupt humanity, whose offspring filled the world with violence before the flood. Genesis 6:1-4. Bound for millennia, they stir as he approaches. Do they recognize him? The one they once defied now stands in their prison. What did he preach to them? The Greek word caruso implies proclamation, not dialogue, not negotiation. This was not a sermon of invitation. It was an announcement of victory. The war is over. The seed promised in Eden has come. Their rebellion is crushed. But here is where conspiracy seeps in. Early church fathers like Origen and Clement reference this descent boldly, Jesus confronting not just human souls but angelic rebels. Yet centuries later, Augustine softens the idea, recasting the spirits in prison as humans from Noah's day, rather than fallen angels. Why the shift? Was it discomfort with a cosmic Christ, striding through angelic battlefields? Or was it deliberate, an effort to domesticate a gospel too wild for empire? And then there is the Gospel of Nicodemus, apocryphal, yes, but echoing early tradition. It describes Hades itself recoiling as Christ arrives, death and Satan arguing in terror. Who is this King of glory? Gates splinter, chains shatter, prophets rejoice as they recognize him. Adam falls at his feet, whispering, "You have come at last." These images were beloved in the East, painted on ancient icons, sung in paschal hymns. Yet in much of the Western Church, they faded into silence. Why? Consider this. If Christ's descent was a battle, then salvation is not merely legal pardon. It is cosmic conquest. The cross was victory above. The descent was victory below. And when he rose, he held keys, the keys of death and Hades. Revelation 1:18. Keys are not ornamental. They signify ownership. He now commands the gates themselves. But what of the watchers? Here lies the forbidden question. Did Christ's proclamation seal their doom or offer them mercy? Some traditions say he declared judgment, reminding them their rebellion was finished. Others, speculative and rare, suggest even they glimpsed redemption's light, though chained, though damned. Scripture does not answer. Perhaps silence here is itself divine, shielding us from mysteries too heavy to bear. Feel the weight of this moment. The righteous above, the wicked below, angels bound in the abyss, all awaiting his word. Imagine the pause before he speaks, a pause so deep it trembles through creation. Every rebellion, every curse, every promise finds its hinge here, and then victory proclaimed. Not shouted but resonant, like thunder under the earth, the chains of prophecy fulfilled. Do you see how this reframes the resurrection? The empty tomb is not merely a man revived, but a king returning from conquest. A cosmic exodus has begun, not just of souls, but of the entire order of creation. Yet one question gnaws still. Why has this chapter faded from modern preaching? Why do we celebrate the cross and the empty tomb but ignore the descent between? Was it too strange? Too apocalyptic? Too unsettling for polite theology? We stand now on the threshold of that silence. And what waits beyond will unsettle us further, because he does not leave the underworld empty-handed. He rises with captives. He carries them upward. And that will shatter everything we thought we knew about resurrection. The silence inside Sheol is not empty. It is thick, like air before a storm. 1,000 generations have been holding their breath. Righteous men and women, prophets and poets, martyrs and mothers, all waiting. And now the silence trembles. We have followed him here already, through the darkness of Jonah's belly, through paradise's paradox, through the prison of the watchers. But this is the turning point. Something shifts beneath your feet. The ground does not quake as at Golgotha. Instead, it exhales. A single voice whispers, then another, then an entire host cries out, as if light itself has entered their shadowed hall. Scripture gives us a hint, almost casually, in Ephesians 4:8. When he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. Most of us skim this. Few stop to ask, captivity captive. Who was he leading? From where? And why does this verse sound like a procession, not a sermon? Ancient Jewish imagination supplies the missing colors. They envisioned Abraham's bosom, a chamber of rest for the faithful dead. There, the patriarchs and prophets longed for a Messiah they had only glimpsed in promise. David with his psalms, Isaiah with his visions, Hannah, still whispering prayers for children she never raised, Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, silent now but watchful. Imagine their faces when the doors of death opened, not with terror, but with the light of the very one they had spoken about without ever seeing. And here, conspiracies creep in. Why is this vivid reunion muted in Western tradition? Why do sermons linger on crucifixion and leap to resurrection, skipping this moment entirely? Could it be that this vision of a Christ storming death to lead a victorious march was too apocalyptic, too wild for later councils to canonize comfortably. They preferred him docile on the cross, not triumphant in the underworld. The paintings of medieval Europe show angels above clouds, not below the earth. Something was buried, not just bodies, but memory itself. Picture it. Adam, the first to fall, now beholding the second Adam, the weight of millennia of guilt in his chest, and then forgiveness. Eve clutching her chest, tears cutting rivers down her face as she beholds the seed promised in Genesis 3:15, now standing before her. Moses, staff lowered, finally entering a promised land stranger, and deeper than Canaan. David, harp in hand, speechless, for the shepherd has become his king. Each one of them carries memories of dust, of exile, of promises half fulfilled, and now, in a single glance, fulfillment. But do not mistake this for easy joy. Jesus does not descend lightly. The weight of every covenant rests on him. Imagine his gaze sweeping across them, relief at their freedom mingled with grief for those beyond the chasm. The chambers of Gehenna still echo with screams. The watchers remain chained in Tartarus. For every face rejoicing, there are others turned away in despair. Does he hear them? Does he ache for them even now? Or is this the moment when justice silences mercy? And the world above knows nothing. Jerusalem mourns in quiet Sabbath rest. The disciples hide behind locked doors, grief curdling into fear. Roman soldiers patrol the tomb, unaware that their watch is meaningless. Under their feet, a procession forms, saints rising in ranks behind the one who holds keys in his hands. Matthew 27:52 gives us the most haunting clue. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Raised when? During his death? At his rising? The text is maddeningly brief, as if daring us to look deeper. Some early fathers believed these freed captives walked Jerusalem's streets as silent witnesses, a foretaste of final resurrection. Yet this verse rarely makes it to pulpits. Too strange, too unsettling. This is where all previous threads converge. Paradise was nearer than we thought. The preaching to spirits was not a sermon, but a declaration of conquest. And now, captivity is led captive, chains rattling behind the King of Kings. The harrowing of hell is not myth. It is the missing hinge between cross and empty tomb. But the question lingers. Why has this moment been erased from so much Christian memory? Why do later traditions soften this march into allegory, hiding its cosmic triumph behind hymns of quiet rest? Could it be that this image, Christ descending like a warrior, freeing souls long chained, threatened too many assumptions about death, judgment, and grace? The silence above the grave deceives you. Roman guards stand half asleep, the wind dragging dust across their sandals. The disciples mourn in whispers, locked away. The women clutch spices, waiting for dawn. To them, this is rest. To heaven and hell, this is war. Listen closer. Beneath the stone, beneath the soil, something moves. The air is thick, electric, as if creation itself holds its breath. Scripture gives us fragments, enough to hint, but never enough to satisfy. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Revelation 1:18. Keys imply conquest. Keys are not given. Keys are taken. But from whom? This is where the narrative fractures, where the church's retelling grows quiet, as though afraid to speak aloud what early believers whispered. Eastern hymns sing of Christ, trampling down death by death. The Gospel of Nicodemus, apocryphal yet hauntingly ancient, speaks of Hades and Satan arguing in panic as the gates shatter. The Book of Enoch hints at watchers bound in Tartarus, groaning at the approach of divine judgment. What do we do with these fragments? Stitch them together, and a forbidden picture emerges. The descent was not rest, but rebellion against death itself. Imagine, if you can, what Jesus sees. Passing beyond the chambers of the righteous he has freed, he descends deeper. The air thickens. The cries grow harsher. Here lie the chained angels Peter and Jude mention, bound in gloomy darkness. Here lie the tyrants, the murderers, the architects of Babel and Babylon. Here lie the spiritual powers Paul names in Ephesians 6, principalities, rulers of the present darkness. These are not silent souls. They rage, they mock, they beg. And here, at the deepest point, stands death itself, not metaphor, not mere concept, but an ancient tyrant the prophets personified, the enemy Isaiah said would be swallowed up forever. How does Jesus confront him? Scripture does not tell us directly. Perhaps that silence is deliberate, as though the moment is too holy or too terrifying to be described. But the outcome is clear. When Jesus rises, he holds the keys. Do you see what that means? Keys unlock. Keys bind. Keys signify authority. If death had ruled unchallenged since Eden, this moment is its overthrow. And yet, strangely, the Gospels barely whisper of it. No gospel describes the battle. No evangelist sketches the scene. Why? Did the first witnesses deem it too obvious, too sacred to record? Or was it later theologians, uneasy with the idea of Christ descending into combat, who recast the story as quiet rest? The conspiracies run deeper. As Christianity spread into the Roman world, its apocalyptic edge dulled. The fierce expectation of cosmic battle gave way to sanitized creeds. He descended into hell, became a line recited, not a vision trembled at. Councils canonized comfort, poets painted peace. But in the oldest traditions, Christ's descent is victory, not vacation. He storms the gates, he spoils the strong man, he binds the captor and liberates the captives. Imagine the clash, light colliding with abyss, chains snapping, gates groaning as if the universe itself is tearing apart. Fallen angels recoil, shielding their eyes from the radiance they abandoned. Ancient kings tremble in silence. Demons hiss curses they know are futile. And in the midst of this chaos, Jesus walks unhurried, unbroken, bearing wounds that shine brighter than any crown. Every step he takes is judgment. Every glance is a verdict. And yet, do not miss his sorrow. This is no gloating conqueror. In his heart is the ache of Eden, the memory of Adam and Eve fleeing the garden. Even as he claims victory, he carries grief for those who remain chained by their own refusal of grace. Does he pause, even here, to weep? We cannot know, but we sense it. Victory and lament entwined. When he emerges, not yet to the garden, but ascending toward it, he carries more than keys. He carries the captives of Abraham's bosom behind him. He carries prophecy fulfilled, promises kept, wars ended, and yet wars still to come. And above, the stone still sits, the guards still yawn, the disciples still doubt. No one knows the cosmic shift unfolding beneath their feet. This moment reframes everything. If Jesus' descent was battle, then resurrection is coronation. The cross was not defeat, followed by vindication. It was infiltration, followed by uprising. The morning did not begin with music. It began with silence. A silence so deep you could hear your own heartbeat inside it. The garden was still damp with the chill of night. The stone rolled aside with no witnesses to see the weight of history move. Imagine standing there. Dawn barely breaking, light spilling soft gold across olive leaves. The air, heavy with the scent of myrrh and crushed grass, carried no hint of trumpets, only the quiet rustle of eternity resetting itself. And then he breathed. Not as he had breathed on the cross, ragged and gasping. This was steady, whole, but scarred, his lungs filled with air, yet carried echoes of Sheol's shadows. Eyes that had looked upon Abraham's bosom, upon Tartarus's chains, now opened into the pale morning of a world that had no idea what had just unfolded beneath its feet. We rarely pause to ask, what did he carry back with him? Was it only his life? Or was it the spoils of war, keys clutched in his wounded hands, promises fulfilled yet still veiled? Isaiah had whispered it centuries before, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to proclaim liberty to the captives." Isaiah 61:1. And now, the captives had followed him out. Because the tombs did not stay sealed. Matthew records a moment so shocking that most sermons never linger there. The tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Matthew 27, 52, 53. What does that even look like? Can you picture Jerusalem, still reeling from an earthquake, Roman soldiers pacing nervously, temple guards whispering of torn veils, and then, suddenly, familiar faces appearing in the streets? You can almost hear the gasp of a mother who buried her son decades ago, the disbelief of a priest who sees Isaiah himself walking past the temple gates, the whispered terror of soldiers. Are these ghosts? Imagine the murmurs spreading. I saw him, the prophet Samuel, or was it David, harp slung across his back, eyes wide with recognition as he beheld the city that once crowned him king. We are not given their names. That silence itself feels conspiratorial, as though the early church whispered about it. But later hands softened the record. Why are there no lists, no testimonies preserved? Were they erased deliberately? Their appearance is too wild, too destabilizing. Because if patriarchs truly walked Jerusalem's streets, resurrection was no longer an idea. It was a reality you could touch. And that terrified the powers that be. But Christ was not with them. He had already left the grave behind, his first steps leading into the garden. And here the story narrows to a single woman, Mary Magdalene, weeping, searching for a body that was no longer there. And into her sorrow, he speaks her name, one word, Mary. And suddenly, the cosmos tilts. She beholds him, not as a distant conqueror, but as the wounded victor, hands scarred, side pierced, eyes blazing with the quiet fire of someone who has seen death and walked back through it. Do you realize how intimate that moment is? The King of Glory, fresh from cosmic war, does not first appear to emperors or priests, but to the one who loved him enough to linger. A woman once shamed, now entrusted with the first announcement of victory. It is conspiratorial in itself. Heaven's greatest secret revealed first to the least likely witness. And yet, beneath this tenderness lies something more terrifying. Revelation 1:18 records his own words. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Keys imply conquest. He did not simply leave the underworld. He claimed dominion over it. If death was a prison, he now holds the master key. And if he holds the key, who holds the locks? Some early hymns in the East sing of this moment as combat. Christ trampled down death by death. The image is violent, almost apocalyptic. Chains shattering, gates splintering. Angels of ruin fleeing at his approach. Could it be that while the world above mourned, the underworld shook in terror? And could it be that what he brought back was more than freedom for the righteous, but secret authority over realms yet unseen? Look closer. Psalm 68:18 echoed in Ephesians 4:8 prophesied this very moment. You ascended on high, leading captivity captive and receiving gifts among men. That phrase, captivity captive, sounds strange to modern ears. But to the ancients, it was victory language. A king leading his enemies or freed prisoners in a procession of triumph. Which was it for Jesus? Did he parade the defeated powers of darkness? Or did he lead Adam, Abraham, David, and countless unnamed faithful up toward paradise restored? Perhaps both. Some early traditions imagine Adam meeting Christ at the gates of Sheol, calling him the second Adam, Eve weeping as the seed of promise finally arrives, David bowing low, seeing in this scarred king the fulfillment of every psalm he ever wrote. These are only glimpses, unrecorded yet whispered in liturgy, as if the early church dared not shout what was too holy to name. And here is where the mystery deepens. When Jesus emerges into the garden, the saints do not follow him visibly. Matthew only hints that they appeared later. Where were they in the hours between? Did they ascend with him unseen? Did they vanish back into waiting? Or do their stories remain deliberately unrecorded, left for us to ponder in the silence Scripture keeps? This silence is not empty. It is thick, pregnant, because it leaves you asking, what else did he bring back? Did he return only with scars and keys, or with knowledge too dangerous for human ears? Did he see what awaits at the end of all things? Did he glimpse faces yet unborn, names written before the foundation of the world? We stand here, in the garden, with sunlight breaking through olive branches. The air carries birdsong now, and distant footsteps approach, disciples still unaware that history has already changed. He rises to meet them, every step echoing with eternity. The war is over. The silence is broken, yet the questions remain. Where did Jesus go? For 3 days, the world thought him gone. The disciples scattered. The women wept. Rome assumed another rebel had been silenced. The priests congratulated themselves. But beneath their feet, in realms they could not name, the Son of God walked a path no mortal had dared tread. The fragments tell us this much. He descended into the heart of the earth, into Sheol, the shadow realm of the dead, not to suffer, but to conquer. There, in chambers described by prophets and hinted at in Psalms, he crossed thresholds from Abraham's bosom, where the righteous waited in hope, to the darker regions where the rebellious spirits groaned in chains. We hear his own words, whispered to the thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Paradise, not yet the heaven of heavens, but the hidden garden long promised, perhaps nestled within Sheol itself. He found the faithful, he spoke to the imprisoned, and in that descent, he bridged divides no theology could fully map. The apostles give us glimpses, riddles really. Peter writes of him proclaiming to the spirits in prison, 1 Peter 3:19. Paul hints that he led captivity captive, Ephesians 4:8. Revelation places keys of death and Hades in his hands, Revelation 1:18. None spell out the sequence. None tell us everything. Perhaps because the full story is too holy, too explosive, to write in mortal ink. Yet patterns emerge when you look closely. He descended into death's domain, not as victim but as invader. He proclaimed liberty to the captives, fulfilling Isaiah 61:1. He shattered gates, loosed patriarchs, reclaimed authority. The saints rose, Matthew's quiet verse like a thunderclap, walking Jerusalem's streets in eerie dawnlight. And when he rose not alone but as the first of many. Did he confront the watchers, those angels bound since Noah's flood? Some texts hint it. Jude and 2 Peter speak of angels kept in chains. The book of Enoch, though not canon, fills in whispers. Angelic rebels held in Tartarus. Could his proclamation have been cosmic? A verdict echoing across aeons? Victory declared not only to men, but to powers and principalities, visible and invisible. What did he bring back? Keys, certainly, the symbols of authority over death and the grave, but perhaps more than that. Perhaps he brought back something unspoken, glimpses of the end of days, knowledge sealed until Revelation's trumpet, a warning to every throne and principality. The gates of death are no longer secure. And why does this matter? Because it changes everything about what resurrection means. This was not a magician escaping death's trap. It was a king raiding enemy territory, plundering its prisons, and returning with captives freed and enemies humiliated. This was conquest, not escape. And yet, even now, mystery lingers. The scriptures do not tell us every detail. The saints who rose are unnamed. The words he spoke in Sheol remain unrevealed. The visions he saw, if he saw them, remain sealed. Was that silence intentional? Did God veil this part of the story to preserve awe, to force us to ponder rather than presume? Theologians debate the sequence. Some argue he went directly to heaven, carrying the thief with him. Others insist he traversed Sheol's depths first, then ascended. The truth, perhaps, is that both are true in ways beyond our temporal maps, that the Garden of Paradise and the corridors of the dead meet where Christ walks. But here is the core truth we cannot escape. Wherever he went, he left nothing untouched. No soul beyond his reach, no depth beyond his descent, no prison unshaken by his steps. So, where did Jesus go in the 3 days between his death and resurrection? Into death's deepest chambers, into paradise's waiting halls, into the prisons of rebellious spirits. into the very heart of what it means to be lost, so that nothing, not even death itself, can claim to be beyond redemption. And now, as the garden brightens and the angels roll back the final shadows, this truth hangs before us. If he descended that far, what depths in you might he reach? What chains might he still break? The story does not end in answers. It ends in invitation. Will you let him into the deepest places? Will you follow him even there? If this journey stirred something in you, do not let it vanish in the noise. There are more whispers hidden in Scripture's pages, waiting to be uncovered. Stay with us. Subscribe, listen closer, and keep walking this narrow road between thunder and silence. And let me know a verse that has been on your mind recently in the comments section. I look forward to hearing from you.